Please stand for the invocation. Please welcome Reverend Sharon Codner Walker.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. As we stand together in oneness, please join with me first in a moment of silence for those who have died because of domestic violence. Second, please place your hand on your heart in gratitude and in thanksgiving for yourself and for those who have worked tirelessly to shine light on abuse and on violence. Third, let us applaud for those who have survived and have broken the chains of domestic violence. Let us pray. Great God, God of many names, God who is present right now, God who undergirds us, God who promises never to leave nor to forsake, we invite your presence with us right now. Magnificent benefactor, we thank you for gathering us, for emboldening us, and for fanning the flame within us so that we can continue to expose and eradicate the pain and the suffering associated with violence. Lord, we ask that you would hold our hands even now as we stand with our young people. Oh God, as we stand with LGBT youth, heterosexual youth, victims of dating abuse, women, men, intimate partners, partner violence in the church and in the home. Be with us. Help us to maintain strength, continuing to confront the culture of violence that we find ourselves in. And, oh God, allow us to break generational curse. Help us to show a new way as allies and ambassadors and advocates for the basic human rights and for recognition as equal contributors to society. Oh God, help us to know that we are charged and challenged to keep one another safe. Oh God, that we are charged and challenged to make certain that it is not the number of people, 10 million, oh God, per year, that report abuse. Help us to show a new way, a different way, so that we can still the cries of the more than 20,000 calls made to domestic hotlines. And finally, Lord, allow those harrowing stories we hear and the readings that we encounter from victims to be turned into testimonies of triumphs and shout from victors. Let us, O God, with conviction be ever mindful that we are indeed our brothers and sisters' keeper. Amen. You may be seated.
All right, I felt that. I don't know whether to sing a hymn or shout, stomp, amen. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Shine a Light on Domestic Violence at SUNY Downstate Medical Center. I want to welcome you. This year's message theme is a message of hope. SUNY Downstate, I got to announce myself. My name is Dr. Magda Allianson. I am the Employee Assistance Program Coordinator for SUNY Downstate Medical Center, as well as the New York State EAP Wellness Ambassador, as well as the chair for the Domestic Violence Committee Awareness Committee. SUNY Downstate has been shining a light on domestic violence for quite some time now. It's been several years. We've had a number of events that have taken place. The initiative started with New York State, the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. The campaign connected communities throughout New York State and turning state buildings and offices purple. So, of course, October is we celebrate domestic violence, but today at SUNY Downstate, we're designated today as Wear Work to Purple Day. I am so happy to see so many people in purple. I've been stopped in the hallways. I had so many people tell me I have to go buy something purple because I don't have anything purple. I really do appreciate it. and I really do appreciate the support from all the staff members. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Kadron Gwen, the Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff from the Office of the President, for our opening remarks.
Well, good afternoon. I thank Magna for that introduction. I started to wear my purple suit, but it was in the cleaners, of course. You know, I cannot say this enough. I think I've done this one other time, having to come behind Reverend Walker. And it is always an upsetting thing, I will say that. Domestic violence. Let me say a thing about domestic violence, sort of on a personal level. No, I'm not going to give you a story that I was an abuser or I was abused. I'm not going to give you that story. A time ago, I was a cynic about domestic abuse, about domestic violence. I was more of a, someone who believed it just doesn't happen the way that people say it does. There's no way. There's no way that domestic violence is as large, is as massive a problem as, we've made it out to be. So I started to pull some of the data. I started to look at some of the data. But first of all, going back a little bit in terms of how big it is. When we look at TV, we used to turn on, as kids, my brothers and I, we would turn on Lifetime. And Lifetime, my brothers and I jokingly used to call, the domestic violence channel. Because every movie at a certain time of day was about someone being abused in some way, shape, form, and fashion. Of course, that translated to the big screen, but of course, well before Lifetime, we had movies on the big screen. So I have a list of movies that you might recognize. The movie Enough. Remember that movie with, I believe it was Jennifer Lopez? She had Enough. Another movie, Men Don't Tell. Remember that movie? Look at that movie. Check that movie out. Men Don't Tell. Another movie, The Perfect Guy. I think that was a more recent movie, but recent is a relative term for some of us. Purple Rain. We're all wearing purple today, but Purple Rain, believe it or not, had a very strong element of domestic abuse or domestic violence in it. Remember the dad, I believe, was abusive to the mom? And all we know from the movie is it's Prince. But the movie itself had a very strong element of domestic violence included. Sleeping with the Enemy. And then all of our favorite, What's Love Got to Do with It? Which is in some ways based on some truth. Again, I believe some of the movie was sort of contrived in order to make it a better movie. But in some ways, it was based on some truth. Again, all of these movies, if you really delve deep enough, are based on somebody's truth somewhere, somebody's truth. Again, I started to look at some of the data, and Reverend Cardinal Walker, she started talking about some of those data. Of course, I wrote them down because I did not want to misquote anything. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. 20 people per minute. And I hate to make this reference, but as we sit here right now, somebody is being abused by an intimate partner. As we sit here right now, someone is being abused. A group of people are being abused. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been victims of physical violence at the hands of an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men, it has been extreme violence. In other words, it may have resulted in death. So someone is not here today because of some intimate partner relationship. So this is exceptionally serious stuff. The presence of a gun increases homicide chances by 500%. And we have to keep this part in mind, that 19% of all domestic violence cases involve a weapon. Not all of them are a gun, but 19% of them involve a gun. I'm sorry, 19% of them involve a weapon. Again, increasing the chances that someone will be killed. That someone will be killed. Obviously, there are data that I could go on and on all day. I'm sure you've read some of those data. Those data are serious data. They're serious. It's serious to read that kind of stuff. It's hard to see it on TV, being portrayed on television. It's hard to see it being portrayed on television, but it's real. I'm no longer a cynic. I'm no longer a cynic as it relates to domestic violence. I figured, when I was younger, everybody had the same training I did as a child. My dad taught us we don't hit women. As you know, I have brothers and a sister who's 10 years my junior. So she didn't necessarily get the same training we got, but of course, her training was don't let anybody hit you. It was a different sort of training. I was like, no, why didn't he tell us that? But my dad said, if a woman hits you, walk away. Because you're stronger, you're bigger, you can avoid a lot of stuff. I appreciate that training. I appreciate that training. But this is serious stuff. Domestic violence is serious. And I'm so glad that we at Downstate recognize that and we're having this program today. Again, I'm no longer a cynic. I'm happy to be here to talk about stuff that I'm not an expert in, but certainly something we've all experienced at some point in our lives. At some family member, some cousin, some brother, sister, whatever, some friend. We're all victims in some way. We're all impacted in some way. So again, at Downstate, we are happy to support such an effort. And that's why we all stand here with purple on. We all stand here, sit here with our purple, brandishing our support for those who have survived. I thank you for your attention. I thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gwen. I'd like to acknowledge some individuals that play an important role, EAP, sexual assault, domestic violence. One of our guests who's here with us today is Mr. Sean Harrington. Can you please stand? He's the EAP regional representative for the New York and the Long Island region, and also for SUNY Downstate Medical Center. Can you please give him a round of applause? Is Belinda Davis here? Unfortunately, Belinda Davis hasn't arrived yet. She's my fellow EAP person at Kingsborough Psychiatric Center. I'd like to acknowledge her also, as well as the CSEA president for Kingsborough Psychiatric Center. Another person who plays a vital role in sexual assault, Title IX, is Ms. Victoria Ajibade. Can you please stand? Ms. Victoria Ajibade, she handles the compliance for Title IX sexual assault and the New York State human rights law. If you notice in the back, we have a couple of people who are here, some partnering organizations. One of them is CAMBA. We have Ms. Lizzie Nelson, who's here today. She's right back there. And Ms. Lizzie Nelson is a health educator and a case manager, and CAMBA is located right in Flatbush. It's on Flatbush Avenue and Church, and they're a non-for-profit organization that provides social services to our community. I think that it's very important work, and I thank you for being here. We also have a special guest also. Can you please stand? And I'm going to try to say this name to the best of my ability. Ms. Amareas Peña Chavez, who's the Deputy Director from the Office of Prevention for the Domestic Violence and the Brooklyn Families Justice Center. Can you please give her a hand? We also have our EAP table in which Ms. Tahisha Williams, she's not currently sitting there right now, but I do want to say that if you would take some information and get some information about EAP, that would be very beneficial to you. Our keynote today is Ms. Ellen Schell. She is the General Counsel for the New York Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Previously, she was counsel to the Legal Project and provided training and technical assistance to civilians, attorneys, advocates working with military-related survivors of intimate partner violence. From 2006 to 2009, Ellen was an assistant district attorney in Essex County, New York, where she had primary responsibility for prosecution of domestic violence, stalking, and sexual assault cases. Ellen was also legal director at the Legal Project from 2001 to 2006, providing civil legal services to survivors of sexual assault and supervising other legal services provided by the organization. Ellen graduated from the Albany Law School, magna cum laude, in 1993. Prior to law school, she worked in organizations providing direct assistance to survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. Can you please welcome Ms. Ellen Schell?
I'm so happy to be able to be here with you today. I have to say that SUNY Downstate is sort of infamous for doing a wonderful job of bringing awareness to domestic violence in October, and other people in my office who have been involved in this event at various times said, oh, you're going to love it, and I do. I love seeing all this purple. I particularly like that you're calling today's event a message of hope, because sometimes I think it's difficult to feel hopeful about domestic violence. 40 years ago, when I first started working on this issue, I was hopeful that we wouldn't still be talking about this now. But apparently, we still are. Domestic Violence Awareness Month is still as relevant and important as ever. Services for victims are just as necessary as they ever have been, and we still don't have enough of them. Hundreds of people, mostly women, are killed by their intimate partners every year in our country. As a society, I think we're way too willing to excuse intimate partner violence, especially if it's committed by someone who's famous, athletically gifted, rich, or otherwise has a lot of power. It seems easier for many people to believe that victims are lying or making a big deal out of something that wasn't a big deal, or to blame them for the violence than for us as a society to understand just how pervasive this is. Sometimes it all seems pretty grim and like we really haven't made much progress. So why am I here today with a message of hope? There really are a lot of reasons, and I'm going to try to explain a few of them. Now, some of these reasons are in the micro and the individual level, and some of them are on a higher, more societal level. But there are many reasons to be hopeful, and maybe this talk will help you catch that spirit of hopefulness a little bit, because we've got to have a little bit of hope to keep doing what we're doing every day. So first of all, we are actually here talking about domestic violence. And that's something that didn't happen for many, many years. As Gloria Steinem once said, we didn't call it domestic violence, we just called it life. And for a long time, that's what we called it. But now we have a name for it. We have laws against it. We have national conversations about it. And we have created effective legal and criminal justice responses. And all of that is really stupendous. And as we talk about it, we can move deeper into the problem. We can move from naming it and identifying it to a point where we can really try to understand ways that we can effectively intervene and prevent some of the most serious harm. On the personal and individual level, I've worked representing victims of domestic violence in family and matrimonial matters for much of the past 25 years. And have worked with victims and survivors as an advocate prior to law school. I have my very own internal long list of clients I've worked with, some of whom survived and some of whom unfortunately did not. It has been my honor to have been able to help them, and I've always been keenly aware of the responsibility of being in some survivors' lives the one person who says, I believe you. The one person who says, I believe you can do what you need to do to get you and your children safe, who says, no matter what you have to do to accomplish that safety, I'll be here to assist if you need me. Now, this really isn't about me. Victims and survivors need many, many people who will give them this message. Unfortunately, that often isn't what they hear. What they hear is, why don't you leave? Why did you let that happen? Why were you drinking? Why did you go back? Why? Frequently, sadly, these blaming questions are from the very professionals who are supposed to be helping. We never know when our response will be when our response will be giving someone the key to their safety, to their ability to fully disclose what's happening to them, or their ability to trust that someone will help them. So it's vital that we do respond appropriately, and it's an awesome responsibility to have. Fortunately, I think today there are many, many more people who understand this and who give appropriate messages to victims. If a victim walks into a prosecutor's office, a police station, a hospital, a family justice center, or many other places, they're much more likely today to encounter people whose first response is not about blaming. It is about helping. Every victim who receives a supportive, helpful response from systems tasked with providing such responses is more likely to achieve safety and also helps show others that seeking help can be a positive experience. I don't think we can downplay how important this is to individual victims. One of the most effective macro improvements on a societal level that we've made is to begin to address domestic violence as a community or a societal issue rather than as an individual problem. Such things as coordinated community responses, DV response teams, high-risk teams, family justice centers, and the Intimate Partner Violence Intervention Initiative show that we are learning that no one group can fix this problem. It truly does take a village, or a city, or a county, or a state. I think we are fortunate to live in New York State, which is consistently leading the pack in improving response to domestic violence. I work in the only statewide executive level agency in the country that is specifically tasked with addressing and preventing domestic violence. Only one in the country. We have a governor and a lieutenant governor who consistently pay attention to women's issues, including domestic violence. And just over the past few years, we've seen Enough is Enough campaign, which I know you all are familiar with here. Our office has a grant program for something called Risk Reduction Enhanced Response Teams, where we fund communities to create a response to identified high-risk cases in a way that works for their community. There have recently been a round of grants from the Office for Victim Services to provide money to domestic violence programs to hire attorneys to work within the program to provide free representation to victims. And I think that is hugely important. We know that people that have good legal assistance have much better outcomes. So one of the visible and really tangible harms of domestic violence is, of course, homicide. Too many people, victims, children, law enforcement, bystanders, and domestic violence offenders themselves quite often become statistics due to domestic violence-related homicides. The harms caused to these families are really irreparable, and the costs to our society as a whole are very high. Although domestic homicides, unfortunately, Although domestic homicides fortunately occur in only a very small number of cases, the harms are really disproportionately large. New York State is continuing to work on this problem with a multifaceted approach and, frankly, putting its money where its mouth is. Earlier this year, Governor Cuomo signed a bill substantially strengthening New York State's laws regarding domestic violence and firearms. This legislation added 13 crimes to the list of serious offenses. When these crimes are committed against a family or household member under New York State law now, that person who committed those crimes will never be allowed to purchase or possess a firearm or have a pistol permit. Given what you said about the presence of firearms in homes so vastly increasing the risk of homicide, that's a very important legislative change. OPDV's Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team reviews cases that provide us with useful information about trends and challenges communities face in addressing domestic violence. Risk reduction grants are a way to fund communities to develop their own protocols to help victims who are identified as high risk and to provide close accountability for offenders who are identified as high risk. 2 days ago, OPDV put on the first ever statewide risk reduction summit where we brought together our funded programs, saw some interesting presentations about addressing high-risk cases, and heard a moving keynote address by your very own Nicole Sharp, who I'm proud to say is on OPDV's advisory council and also on our fatality review team. Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul also came and spoke to the summit audience about domestic violence. Her interest in and commitment to this issue showed the attendees at the summit how very important this issue is to the executive chamber. And we know when things are important to people that are high up in government, attention gets paid, and I think attention is getting paid to this issue. I'm really happy to report that last year, 2017, had the lowest number of intimate partner homicides we've ever seen in New York State, 59 cases. Now that probably sounds like a lot, and it is. It's way too many. But over the past 6 years that I've been in this job, it's averaged about 80 cases a year. Sometimes a few lower, sometimes a few higher, but 80's been the sort of the midline. So we're going to be watching and really hoping this is a trend and not just a blip. But I'm hopeful that the attention that's being paid to this issue is really going to continue to make a difference in that homicide rate. In the next year, OPDV is going to be engaged in working to develop a statewide coordinated response to non-fatal strangulation cases. We know that strangulation is hugely predictive of potential lethality. We do not have a uniform process for screening for strangulation or for assessing or treating victims when we do identify them. And so we're going to be working on how to create that as a statewide thing. Now, I wish I could say that it could happen in a year. I think it's more like a 5-year plan if we're doing well, but it's something that we're going to start working with the Department of Health and other agencies. We believe that we can create a uniform, coordinated statewide protocol under which all victims of domestic violence will be screened for strangulation. And if once they're identified, they'll be medically assessed and treated, and that these cases will be well documented in their medical records. Having this step done will make it possible to really effectively prosecute cases, which is not happening now. What we have is in 2010, we got 3 new laws on the books that made strangulation a crime. Specifically, there's 1 misdemeanor and 2 felony level cases, and across the state, depending on where you are, between 85 and 95% of all the cases charged are at the misdemeanor level. And we know that misdemeanor crimes don't carry a very high penalty. And for someone that is willing to strangle an intimate partner, it's a very short step, and sometimes purely happenstance whether that partner actually survives or not. So we think that this could be a very, very important initiative. We're also going to be holding a statewide conference next spring to talk about this issue and how we may work towards creating this approach in New York. So there's a lot going on in New York to deal with various aspects of domestic violence. The state clearly has a deep commitment to addressing this issue and in looking at many of the different aspects that you have to look at it from. The state can't do it all, of course. We will only have an impact on the overall problem of domestic violence when we can change our societal beliefs about gender roles, who's entitled to get what they want in a relationship and what they're entitled to do to get it, and what are normal or acceptable forms of violence. I mean, your talk about sort of what you see in the media and stuff is so right on, because those messages that kids get, they get them constantly. And we have to get the right messages to children before many of these almost subliminal messages they get through the media, social media, friends and families crowd out the good messages. So I know that there are a lot of people who understand this and are working on this side of things, and I think that that is so necessary. There are a lot of other things I could say. I could really stand here and talk about domestic violence all day, but I'm pretty sure you all don't want that to happen. So let me end with this. I truly do see hope for individual victims, hope for New York State, and hope for our society as a whole in our work against domestic violence. When I look around and I see all of you in your beautiful purple and see how wonderfully you managed to bring awareness to this issue, I know that there are really many, many good people out there who get it and will continue to dedicate ourselves to this cause. Thank you so much for inviting me here to address you. Thank you for being involved and engaged. And thank you for providing tangible proof that hope is real, change happens, and we can continue to do better. Better for our victims, better for our children, better for our state, and better for our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I want to thank you for coming to SUNY Downstate. I know that you had another engagement and you canceled in order to be here. On behalf of myself and the entire SUNY Downstate staff, I want to thank you very much. I want everyone to turn to your left. We have some posters. As you know, our theme this year is a message of hope. Imagine you're a victim in a women's shelter, and you're walking down the hall, and you stop, and you look at that poster. That poster will have hundreds, I hope, hundreds of messages that say anything, anywhere from we are with you, we will walk with you, we will be there for you, you are beautiful. A message goes a long, long way. And I would hope that every single one of you who is here today will take a time. It could be one simple word. A victim, a woman or man or a child will greatly appreciate it. Also, the posters will be presented to a women's shelter in Brooklyn. We're hoping that we can present each poster to 2 different women's shelters as we honor victims, because we do want to honor victims and tell them that there is hope. Our next speaker is Ms. Nicole Sharp. I've known Nicole Sharp for quite some time, and she does have a story to tell. She is an author, advocate, founder of the Heather Hurley Foundation, She sits on the New York State Domestic Violence Advisory Board, as you heard before, and she's the co-chair for the Domestic Violence Awareness Committee. Can you please welcome Ms. Nicole Sharp?
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? It's so beautiful to see a sea of purple. I love it so much. And next year is going to be even better, right? Even bigger. So thank you for having me here, Magda. I'd like to thank the EAP, Department of Human Resources, and the Domestic Violence Awareness Committee for having me. And thank you, Ellen Michelle, for your very moving address. I appreciate it. So yes, I do have a story. Many of you here do know my story and know that I started advocating 10 whole years ago. It doesn't seem like it. And I started right here at SUNY Downstate. Through the dean's office, I just started putting up tables and just giving out literature from the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence in the mayor's office to combat domestic violence. And we just got such an overwhelming response. A campaign was created to raise awareness. And Downstate seems to have spearheaded this awareness campaign. A lot of victims started coming forward, looking for help, and that just warmed my heart. Now, why did I start advocating for domestic violence awareness? Because I myself am a child survivor of domestic violence. And as you can see, I'm no longer a child, but I still call myself a child survivor because as a child, I grew up seeing domestic violence on a regular basis, and it became a part of my life, and it became something that seemed normal, and we know it's not normal. I actually wrote a book about it called The End of November, Growing Up with Domestic Violence, and I called it Growing Up with Domestic Violence because domestic violence was like another person in the house, ever present, and created this false normalcy. So living in my home was like living in a prison, and I used to call it a prison as a child. And there, my father, he was in control. And domestic violence is all about power and control, not anger, not just anger like some people think. It's power and control. So he had control over our thoughts, everything that we did. My father didn't believe in God, so we weren't supposed to believe in God either. So we couldn't go to church. And so my mother would actually sneak out at night on a Friday night or Saturday night when my father went binge drinking, and we would hide and sneak and go to church like at midnight and come back in time before he came back from drinking. Or he might be passed out, so he didn't even notice us coming back in. We couldn't read the Bible, so we used to hide and read the Bible. So yeah, it was like a prison, and I walked on eggshells, I felt like I was walking on eggshells, the way that I was living, because you never knew when my father was going to blow up again. So I always had a feeling that one of my parents was going to die because of all the fighting that happened in the house, with my father always having the upper hand. And so I would put myself through a mourning process, which is so abnormal, to try to prepare myself for when that day actually did come. So when I would wake up in the morning, sometimes I'd be like, is this the day? Is this the day that one of them is going to die? And unfortunately, finally, that day did come when my father did kill my mother, and he shot her to death in front of my younger brother and sister while I was trying to get help on the phone. And I didn't call the police because I was told not to call the police by my mother. And I actually did call the police in the past and got in trouble for it from my mother. But even if I did call the police, the shot happened while I was on the phone with my maternal grandmother. So I wasn't able to help my mother that night. But from then, we were orphaned as a result. And ACS actually came to the police station, and they were going to separate us according to age. And there was a big age range. I was 15, my sister was 8, and my little brother was 3, so we were going to go into 3 separate homes. But my mother's family begged for us to stay with my grandmother for a few days. And a few days became a few years. And I'm happy that it did. But at the same time, though, my family continued the abuse in a way psychologically by making us know that we are burdens, basically, and taking advantage of us financially. When people know that you have no parents, they feel like they can just take advantage of you. That's my second story, the second half of the book. But I'm really happy that I can be able to advocate for others today. I advocate for individuals who are looking for help, and just creating platforms such as a message of hope. Thank you, Magda. Just people knowing about it, even if they didn't actually come here, just knowing that there's a place that full of people who actually care and that people cared enough to create a platform to speak about domestic violence. It actually helps people to want to move towards getting help. Because domestic violence, I always say that silence breeds violence. So when you talk about it, it helps to break down the walls of domestic violence. So I'm so happy for platforms such as this. And I myself, I have an event that I have every year called Purple Power. And we're in our 7th year. And I have some information in the back on the table with the purple tablecloth that you can pick up. But I don't want to stay here forever. But I'm going to just, I just want to share a short chapter of my book. It's called $100 Bills. And I actually wrote this book. First, it was a blog just to get out what I've been feeling all these years, what I've been keeping inside. And then my friends encouraged me to turn it into an actual book, so I did. And the blog was called Ward of the Court, because that's what I was when I was orphaned, just a ward of the court. So this chapter, $100 Bills, goes like this. I always knew that one of my parents would die by the hands of the other. So from the age of 7, I would pretend now and then that one of them died, and I would go through the motions of extreme grief and sadness. My imagination would actually put me there in the funeral parlor, as if my mom or dad was in the coffin dead. I would cry, and the despair would envelope me until it stopped. Sounds weird, I know. But I actually made a conscious resolve in my head as a young child that I would prepare my mind for the inevitable, so that when it did happen, it wouldn't hurt so much. How did I know one of my parents would die by the hand of the other? It wasn't mathematics. They fought constantly with my father having the upper hand always. Actually, my mother would try to defend herself from the physical blows my father would plague her body with. Her skin would become raised with big red blotches everywhere, except for her arms and face, of course. And her eyes would be filled with tears that welled up, but never trickled out, at least not for me to see. Shame was written all over my mother's face as she looked at me every time my father would finish beating her. When I was 6, we moved from a 2nd-floor apartment into a 2-family house to the basement of another 2-family house 1 block away. And I hated this place because it was dark and the windows were so little and I couldn't even climb out of them if I wanted to. So there was hardly any sunlight and the walls were 70s plywood panels. Every time I see them, I am absolutely disgusted. No matter how much my mom cleaned, the place would always smell like a garage, damp and rocky. At this home of ours, my mother showed me an envelope filled with $100 bills for the first time. I can't remember how many bills were there exactly, but it was a thick envelope. She sat me down as if she was giving me the talk. In my world, this was the talk. Instructions on how to save my life when she died. I'm putting this envelope under my mattress. If anything happens to me, take it and go to your grandmother's house, okay? She told me. I was either 7 or 8 at the time, and I knew exactly what she meant by, if anything happens to me. So I just shook my head in agreement. Back then, it felt chilling but normal. Now I wonder, how can $100 bills compensate for the loss of my mother? What was she thinking? But she wasn't thinking. My mom was feeling pure desperation, knowing that her life was on the line every single day. I want everyone in abusive relationships and environments to understand that they can get help. There are many programs that can help you regardless of how trapped you may feel. There is no reason for anyone to live in fear for their life. Save your children, save yourselves. The next time we moved, it was into our house, our own house. Our parents bought a beautiful 3-bedroom home with a huge backyard, a beautiful front lawn, and a full basement. I was 10 at this time and so elated to have a big bedroom to myself. Then my mom came to me again with part 2 of the talk. She showed me a thick envelope of $100 bills and said, if anything happens to me, take this, okay? Somehow I thought that moving into this house was going to mean change for the better. Maybe, I thought, my father would stop beating my mother and we could be like those families on TV. But when my mother came to me with the same low, secretive voice, although my father wasn't even in the house at the time, and showed me the envelope again, this time with even more $100 bills, I sighed inside my soul. At that moment, I realized We weren't transitioning to a better place at all. Dismayed, I complied, "Okay, Mommy." Then she stuffed the envelope underneath the carpet in her bedroom by the closet door in the corner. 6 years later, when my father finally did kill my mom, I totally forgot about the envelope filled with $100 bills. I was only concerned about saving myself and the lives of my little brother and sister. But my message of hope is that I believe that prevention is better than cure. So I created a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit in my mother's name called the Heather Hurley Foundation for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. And with that organization, we're going to be bringing a program that's already in effect in Arizona called Bloom 365. It's a teen dating violence educational program, which is going to break down the dysfunctional social norms that we have for children so that they can learn that domestic violence and any kind of violence is not the answer. So my hope is for the future, and just looking for funding right now to make that happen. But I do have a hope for the future. And I want to thank you all for coming today, and take care.
Thank you, Nicole, for sharing your story. I was hoping that our local precinct officer, he is here. Oh, yes, thank you, Jesus. Can you please stand up? Can you please come forward, because I would like to acknowledge you. I want to thank and salute every single officer. They're the ones that are on the front line every day dealing with domestic violence cases. They have to go into people's homes. Anything could happen in the streets, and I just want to salute you and thank you for all the work that you do. Please. And thank you for joining us today. Nicole talked about one of the tables. The table that's in the back, it's purple. It has some OPDV information on there, and I hope that you'll be able to just grab some information, as much as information that you can. It may help you and someone you know.
Domestic violence affects every neighborhood, every community.
Last year, the NYPD responded to an average of 770 domestic violence incidents every day.
You are the greatest tool we have to end domestic abuse.
We want every New Yorker to ask,
what can I do to help?
Instead of being a bystander to domestic violence in our city,
we need everyone to become an upstander.
Because everyone plays a role in preventing domestic violence.
I am an upstander.
It is my business when I hear abuse next door.
An upstander does not stand for people making light of domestic violence.
An upstander talks to their friends and family
About the relationship they deserve.
Every woman, man, and child has the right to be free of violence and intimidation in their home.
Awareness,
Help.
Hope.
If some of you don't know the hashtag upstander, I would please like for you to Google it. You can help make a difference in someone else's life. As the EAP coordinator for SUNY Downstate, my mission is to help individuals navigate through work and life transitions. And in helping them do that, it's my responsibility to provide a confidential program that will provide assessment, information, education, and referrals in order to help with work-related and/or personal problems. One of these problems or issues or topics include domestic violence. So I encourage you, if you or someone you know needs help, to please contact the EAP office. Please speak to one of our partnering agencies that are here to provide information to us. I encourage you to do the best that you can to stop it today. We're going to try the best that we can at SUNY Downstate to come together as a community to help whoever, whenever we can. Now I'm going to start with the thank yous. I have a lot of thank yous. I want to thank our guest speaker, Ms. Ellen Schell, for speaking to us today and informing us about your vision and mission to combat domestic violence. I want to thank you for your tireless work, and we at Downstate thank you wholeheartedly. I want to thank Dr. Gwen and the Office of the President for recognizing the importance of domestic violence awareness. We appreciate your support. I want to thank Dr. Riley for helping me to encourage all the staff this morning. If you saw the video that went out encouraging individuals to take the picture and, of course, write a message in the heart, a message of hope. I want to thank Nicole Sharp for sharing your story, for advocating, for your passion, for your commitment, and to bringing an end to the DV epidemic. I want to thank you, Reverend Walker, for your commitment, drive, and motivation in helping others in their journey to healing and to know that whatever God you serve is the answer to all things. To all our partnering organizations who are here, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today and providing substantial information to us. It will be very helpful, and we thank you very much. To the Office of Human Resources, I want to thank you, Judith Dorsey. She's way in the back over there. She sponsored this event. Lord knows I asked for a lot, and I thank you so much. Tahisha Williams. Okay. I had to give her 2 Advils and a glass of water because I done drove her crazy. But I want to thank you for every single thing that you do. I thank you every day, 10 times a day, and I want to thank you for helping me. You are a trooper. Miss Dawn Skeet Walker. Dawn, I want to thank you so much. You are the one that told me I even had a theme. I just said a message of hope, and she said, that's your theme. Dawn is the AVP for Biomedical Communication. I want to thank the whole staff, especially Luke, Frank, Marcos, and Arlene, who are always available at a moment's notice. And I mean a moment's notice. I want to thank Adriana Conde, she's way back there, for getting Ellen Schell to come be our guest speaker today. I really do appreciate it. And I thank for going to get her because I thought she was late and I was panicking. But thank you so much. And lastly, but of course not least, also I want to thank all the volunteers. Can please all my volunteers stand up? I just want to acknowledge all of you. Y'all better not be shy. Stand up. Thank you to all the volunteers that have helped me today. Thank you to the AV. Thank you to AV, Classroom Services, FMND, Cafe 101, and all our guests. Lastly, I would like to leave you with this. I said this last year, and I'm going to say it again this year. Every human being has the right to be treated with respect. It is our intentions today to send the message that domestic violence and domestic abuse is unacceptable. By breaking through the shield of silence, we hope that those being victimized in domestic relationships will begin to come forward. I want to thank you all for coming today, and I hope that you'll be here at the next year's event, and please continue to shine that light. Thank you so much for coming.
You guys, let's do a smack down around the applause for